Israel now, and over 1 million Palestinian civilians currently taking shelter in the southern city of Rafah, and they are preparing for what seems to be Israel's latest offensive.
Comes amid growing international pressure on Benjamin Netanyahu to exercise restraint.
Joining us now for the latest, Lieutenant Colonel Peter Lerner, a spokesman for the Israeli Defense Force, the IDF. Colonel Peter Lerner, thank you very much indeed for joining us. I try and put this in the right way, and I start always these sentences the same. There isn't a person, I hope, in the world that didn't see the atrocities of October the 7th and understand Israel's right to rid this planet of a vile, vile terrorist cell. However, you will understand, the longer this has gone on, these displaced people, the deaths of women and children, the global community has changed its stance somewhat, including your major ally, America. I guess what I want to ask you is, what is the end game? Because 1.3 million Palestinians in Gaza have moved south, they were told to, and now that is potentially an area that is going to be decimated. What are the IDF trying to achieve, my friend?
Good morning. Thank you. And thank you for that opening. I definitely agree that seeing the devastation that Hamas committed strategically, intentionally on the 7th of October requires a paradigm change. That is what we are trying, and that is what we intend on achieving. The paradigm change is one where Hamas can no longer govern the Gaza Strip as a terrorist entity, a terrorist authority that subordinates all of the civilian components of government for its terrorist endeavors. We have destroyed, dismantled, taken its capabilities in the northern Gaza Strip, in central Gaza Strip, in the last 4 months apart. And we are pushing forward towards the last stronghold, the last bastion, really, of Rafah. In the outstanding rescue mission that we conducted in the early hours of yesterday's morning, when we brought home Louis Har and Fernando Marman, a 71-year-old and a 60-year-old, respectively, we brought them home. They were being held in Rafah. So, of course, the operations, the challenge of conducting operations in densely populated areas is not a new concept. And throughout the course of this war, we've proven time and time again that we can mobilize civilians out of harm's way. It's not an easy thing to do by any stretch of the imagination, but it is a reality of our obligations, a professional military, to distinguish between civilians and non-combatants. This is the challenge. With regard, I think, to the comment on our allies, we are very attentive to our allies, the US, the UK. We are listening their comments weigh very heavily on us and on our planning process. But we are all in agreement that Hamas have to go.
Can we ask about the planning? Morning to you, Peter, and thank you for your time, because those civilians moved to Rafah because they were told by you that that was a safe place to go to. You've talked about the hostage release. It's at least 67 Palestinians lost their lives in that. And Netanyahu said that was a perfect operation. That surely was far from perfect.
So every civilian life lost in this war is a tragedy. It's an individual, a family tragedy. It's a tragedy for the communities, whether Israelis or Palestinians. They are all a direct result of Hamas's aggression against Israel. The alternative to us not fighting to get rid of Hamas would be raising a white flag of surrender and sacrificing the 134 Israelis that remain in the clutches of Hamas. We have to operate in a way which changes the paradigm. We have to operate in a way that distinguishes between civilians and terrorists and Hamas terrorists. That is what we're doing. And what we did in the initial stages, for instance, when we mobilized all of northern Gaza, the people living in northern Gaza to the south, was to get them out of harm's way. It can be done again. It has to be done in order to, if we conduct such a wide-scale operation. But as we've shown throughout the last 4 months, there are different variations of operations, from wide-scale in the north to limited controlled operations in Khan Yunis, where we evacuated specific neighborhoods from place to place. or through the special operations that we conducted
in the operation that you're planning. The US have said, could you have you need to have a credible plan for the civilians. What is that? Where can they go that is safe?
There are plenty places in Gaza today that are safer if we decide to mobilize. And of course, we've presented, or we have been instructed by the government to present a plan of action that gives a result or a response to those concerns.
But Rafah is currently not safe for those civilians.
The government will have to decide if we mobilize. If we're not mobilizing, then people will stay in Rafah. Of course, Hamas can't be given. But what we've seen throughout the course of this war, and I think this is really important to weigh on this just for a second, Hamas have weaponized the civilian arena. They do it intentionally to prevent our military from operating against them. They're hiding behind the civilians, they hide in schools, they take advantage of the United Nations facilities and intentionally place their data center beneath the UN UNRWA headquarters in Gaza City. So this is the enemy we are facing. Do we not fight against terrorism? Do we hope that they surrender or unconditionally or let free the hostages?
Peter, can I just jump in?
Do that without any immense pressure on them.
Peter, can I just jump in? Great to talk to you. Just one final question. You talked about a paradigm change. I think when this started and we talked about those atrocities in October, we talked about a two-state solution. Netanyahu's changed his tack somewhat. I just want to ask you one thing. Speaking to Yotam Kafino earlier from Jewish News, let's say you manage to find these last 4 cells and carry out this intricate operation. These people are displaced. The world carries on. Do you fear, though, that despite victory, maybe militarily, that ideologically, because of what's happened, Hamas will continue to survive?
Hamas cannot survive as a governing authority or as a terrorist entity. That has been our goal, the military's goal from the outset, not necessarily to change hearts and minds or to try and defeat an ideology. We've seen that has not been successful around the world, almost probably since the eradication of Nazism, and even that, there's still pockets of that exist today. So I would say, no, we are fighting to defeat Hamas as a governing authority. What they did with the powers of government was build a terrorist army. What they did with the powers of government was build a huge arsenal of rockets that even this morning they continue to try and launch against us. What they did is create attack drones. They built this huge, unbelievable network of tunnels, the most vast, expansive construction project ever to exist in the Gaza Strip, hundreds of miles beneath ground, not for the welfare or benefit of the people of Gaza, but for one goal, for terrorism. They have to go. That has to be the outcome. We're determined to deliver on that. It may take some time. They've been planning this for 16 years, so it will not be, or I would say there is absolutely no quick fix to this, unfortunately. We wish we could just wave a magic wand and it would all be over and save lives. But Hamas have weaponized this arena precisely for this type of war, and it will take time to get rid of them.
Peter Lerner from the Israeli Defense Force, thank you very much.
Thank you,